Hi, my name is JB, and welcome to Movie Talk, where I discuss and break down my favorite movies. Today, I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies, On the Waterfront, directed by Elia Kazan and starring Marlon Brando. And basically, what I want to talk about here is I don't want to give a review or anything. This is for people who've seen this movie. Basically, I want to give my interpretation of what I think this film is really about. And in the very beginning of this film, in the opening credits, they show the titles superimposed over a cloth, and that's really what this film is all about. You see that each fiber in that cloth is very, very clear, very razor sharp, and I think that what they're saying is they're saying that we are all threads in a common cloth, that we are all accountable to each other. And I think that that's embodied and illustrated beautifully in just the opening titles without even getting deeply into the movie. Elia Kazan did a fantastic job on this movie, by the way. But getting into the film, this film centers on two brothers. And they centered on two brothers who basically, between these two brothers, they have it's not a secret, but it's just something between these two brothers that they have buried. And the backstory of this film is that Terry Malloy, played by Marlon Brando, was once a prize fighter. He was once a very good fighter. And his older brother took him under his wing, and his older brother also worked for the mob. And particularly this guy by the name of Johnny Friendly, played by Lee J. Cobb. And they got Terry Malloy to throw a fight that would have earned him a shot at fighting for the title. And from that point, Terry's career goes downhill, and basically he's just given a soft job on these shipping docks down in Hoboken, New Jersey, working under this mob boss as a snitch. And the film starts out where there's this gentleman by the name of Joey Doyle who works on the shipping dock, but who is very outspoken, and he plans on testifying against Johnny Friendly. Johnny Friendly gets Terry Malloy to go to get Joey to come out of his apartment and to go up on the roof where Johnny Friendly's men are waiting, and where they eventually throw him off the roof. And once they throw him off the roof, then it's like Terry Malloy feels betrayed again because he just thought they were going to talk to the guy. So basically, he's been completely emasculated. He's had everything taken away from him, especially not only throwing the fight, but by the fact that he was betrayed by his brother. Now, this betrayal is the thread that really ties the whole movie, that ties the whole cloth, if you will, together. Now, the rest of the film is basically focused on who killed Joey Doyle. And Joey Doyle's sister is played by a very young, very fresh Janet Leigh. And this was Janet Leigh's first film. She did a real good job in this film. And she is trying to find out who killed her brother. And there's this priest by the name of Father Barry who is, he wants to get involved, but he wants to stay in. He wants, people to come to church. He wants to deal with it in the church. But he finds out that the only way that he could really be effective doing what he does as a minister of God, as a saint or as a shepherd, is to go out into the community. And I think that, looking at it from a certain point of view, you could look at him as being like an activist. So he becomes an activist in the film, and he's actively trying to help Edie find out who killed her brother. And at the same time, you have Terry Malloy, who gets mixed up with Edie. And Edie, she knows that he is mixed up with with Charlie the Gent, who is Johnny Friendly's right hand man, and she kind of suspects that he knows something uh, about what happened. But he's basically trying to warn her. Keep your mouth shut. It's about D&D down here, deaf and dumb. It's not about running your mouth. It's about keeping your mouth closed. It's about just not saying anything. And that D&D, being deaf and dumb, and just keeping things to yourself and minding your own business, that plays into his relationship with his brother. It plays into the Johnny Friendly uh, killing Joey Doyle not to get him to testify. All of those things have something to do with playing D&D and just keeping to yourself. Because what happens is that he falls in love with this young lady. She falls in love with him, and then he's conflicted by his conscience. What happens is he's a very tough kid. He came up very tough. He came up the hard way. He came up in a school where he was abused by the nuns. He had to drop out of school to make a living. Boxing. I think he put his brother through college and everything. His brother got a degree in accounting, so he just saw the rough part of life, But what happens in his relationship with Edie is that she softens him up. She shows him a different side to life. A side to life that's not about trying to take advantage of him, but a side of him that cares. And once she shows him this, he begins to feel kind of guilty about the part that he played in the murder of Joey Doyle and luring Joey Doyle out of his apartment so they could throw him off the roof. And so this begins his transformation, his character arc. Now he's beginning to kind of realize that it's not all about just me all the time, but he's not quite there yet. The minister, not the minister, but the priest, Barry, Father Barry, his transformation took place a little bit earlier when he saw the conditions that the men were subjected to on the docks. How they made the men fight each other over work tokens, and not only that, but how the men couldn't talk about things that they saw, injustices they saw on the docks, and how their knowledge of what happened to Joey Doyle. And so he becomes involved, and partly because of shame, because Edie shamed him and said, hey, I never heard of a priest. He told Edie in the beginning of the film when Joey Doyle was thrown off the roof, and he was trying to console Edie and telling her, hey, why don't you just come back to the church? He's saying, hey, I never heard of a priest helping people in the church, And so Father Doyle, his character arc kind of, took place a little bit earlier than Terry Malloy's. Terry Malloy's is everything revolves around him, but there are people around Joey Doyle whose lives are changed throughout this whole incident involving Joey Doyle, and also Terry Malloy, because what happens in the film with a dock worker by the name of K.O. Dugan, he decides to pick up where Joey Doyle left off, but not right away. What's symbolic about his role in the film, and the fact that he followed Joey Doyle, and it's so beautiful the way that Elia Kazan did this, was after Joey Doyle was killed, Joey Doyle's father, Pops, gave Dugan Joey's old windbreaker. And that windbreaker is very symbolic throughout the story. It's very beautiful, very poetic, very beautiful story in the way it's told. He gave him the windbreaker, which was basically passing the torch down to Joey Doyle. Now, passing the torch down, to K.O. Dugan. Now K.O. Dugan took up the torch that Joey left off by testifying to the crime commission. And once Father Barry uh, uh, sees that there is somebody who is willing to step forward and break that code of D&D, and he says, hey, I'm going to stand with you. There's a lot of symbolism there, because Father Doyle in this story represents Christ. He represents Christ. And that's why K.O. Dugan asked him, are you willing to go all the way with me? If I go, it's not going to be easy. These people are going to come at you hard. Are you willing to go all the way with me? I think that's man asking God, are you going to stand with me? Because if you stand with me, then I will go. And that's what Joey Doyle, I keep saying Joey Doyle, that's what K.O. Dugan meant when he asked Father Barry that question after Johnny Friendly's men came to the church and threw the brick through the window. And after K.O. Dugan was killed in the hold of that ship, and Father Dugan gave that beautiful cavalry speech, where he likened everybody that was watching as being witnesses to a crucifixion. And then you saw that beautiful scene of Father Barry, Joey Doyle, and Pops being hoisted, being raised by that crane out of that hole. And I think that meant that KO was going to heaven. He's going up to heaven after making his sacrifice. And that's what the film is about also. It's about sacrifice. It's about, okay, you have to make a sacrifice for somebody. Father Doyle made a sacrifice by inviting them to the church, and then coming out of the church, he made the first sacrifice. The second person that made the sacrifice was Edie, because Edie, remember, was in school, and Pops wanted her to go back to school. Edie said, I'm not going back to school. So that was the second person making the sacrifice. And then K.O. Dugan made the sacrifice, and the last person to make the sacrifice, the last one to make the sacrifice, well, ultimately, he wasn't the last. The last person to make the sacrifice was Charlie the Gent, but I'm going to get to him later. Then before Charlie the Gent, though, Terry Malloy made the sacrifice, because now, by him agreeing to testify against Johnny Friendly and turn snitch, then he sacrificed the comfort that they gave him and the privileges they gave him by keeping his mouth shut and by snitching on everybody else. He made that sacrifice. And once he made that sacrifice, his pigeons were killed, by the kid who idolized him. And then finally, he and his brother had the iconic cab ride. If you had to pick out just 4 minutes, 4 minutes in movie history, the most well acted 4 minutes, to me, for my money, it's got to be that cab scene. Everything that you could want came out of both of those actors. They really pushed each other in that scene. Just the greatest acting scene that I've ever seen. The greatest acting scene that I've ever seen. But in that scene where Charlie the Gent told his brother to make up his mind on not testifying against Johnny Friendly before they get to, I think, 437 River Street. I believe that was 437, 431, 434 River. But before that cab got to where it was going, he told his brother, he said, you make up your mind, and he put the gun on him. And you notice how he put the gun down, he just pushed it down gently. Pushed it down real gently. And I watched the documentary, and I really agree with the one gentleman who compared, who said that that was a very feminine gesture. And but what I want to add to that is that's the same gesture that Edie made to Terry, because remember, Terry in the beginning of the film, he was very hard. He had this protective, this force field around him to where, it was like, you beat him or he beats you. But she showed him so much tenderness, that femininity that came out of him, that came out of her, that he was never exposed to in his whole life. It softened him up. And what it did was it brought out his conscience about what he did, because he tried to bury what he did with Joey Doyle until she showed him that tenderness. And that's the same thing that Terry showed Charlie the Gent in that cab. He showed him tenderness. And when he showed him that tenderness, I think that is what made Charlie the Gent decide that I'm going to make a sacrifice. I'm going to atone for the wrong that I did my brother in making him give up his whole life with his boxing career. He could have been anything. He could have been a contender. But I'm going to atone for that by what? Coming back to that word again, sacrifice. I'm going to sacrifice my life. And you notice, when you go to that scene where they find Charlie the Gent hanging in that alley, what does he look like? He looks like Christ on the cross. He looks like he's hanging on a crucifix. And to reinforce that particular scene, right before that scene, when Terry went to Edie's place and they had that love-making scene that they didn't show. They were behind that wall. But what was on that wall that they were behind? The crucifix. Other scenes in the movie where there's a particular scene where Edie's on that roof, and you see all of those antennas that are sticking off of that roof. But there's a few times where this antenna, the way that they have that shot framed around her, that antenna is over her right shoulder, looks just like a crucifix. So that was the whole theme of the movie. It was about making a sacrifice. And that is what Charlie the Gent made. He made the ultimate sacrifice. And then Terry went back to the docks to basically win the fight that they had him throw way back when. That was one fight that he was not going to lose. That's why Father Barry whispered in his ear, Johnny's laying odds that you're not going to go, that you're not going to make it. Because I believe that they were using that scene to foreshadow what he had done before the film began by throwing that fight. But that is my interpretation of On the Waterfront. I know that it was protracted. I'm sorry. I just get so excited about that film. That is one of my favorite. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at that, and I will see you next time. Thank you. God bless you.